Hi everyone, my name's Alice Jones. I'm here with many of the people behind what you've just watched, so just a quick run through of everyone, so we've got all the names. So we've got the writers, Andy Riley and Kevin Cecil. Producer Hannah Mackay. Director Ben Taylor. And the heroes of the hour, Matt Berry, Susan Wokoma, and Freddie Fox. So I'm going to ask them some questions about what we've just seen, and there will be some time at the end for you to ask questions as well. So do have those ready. I'm going to start with the writing of it. So can you tell me what was your kind of starting point? What was your kind of one-line elevator pitch, I guess? It
started when Ben Farrell, who is the executive producer up there, one of them, he showed us a photograph. It's a real Victorian photograph of real Victorian cops where they are in disguise. And they are in quite unconvincing disguises. And one of them is pretending to be a one-armed man, but you can see the arm inside the coat. And he showed us this photograph, and he said, "What do you think about a Victorian police show centred around Matt?" And we're working on something else, and the test for when to get involved with an idea is, do you immediately come up with 3 pages of ideas when you're supposed to be working on something else? And we did.
Excellent. And did you sort of have any qualms about? I mean, Fiona mentioned this at the start, but the way it marries, it's a comedy. But obviously there has to be a plot and quite a twisty mystery at the heart of it.
It's a bit more difficult to do in some ways. In some ways, it's easier to do because you have to do that work. So you have to have the story, you have to have the plot. So it's quite complicated, and there's an arc that goes over the series. And so yeah, I think if we'd known how complicated and difficult it was, we maybe wouldn't have done it. But I think that's true for everything I've ever done.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah, everything. It was the same as everything, isn't it? You go, oh, this one's going to be really easy.
Yeah, it'd be fine.
Because it's really flowing.
And then, like a year later, when you're just banging your head against the wall, you go, no, it wasn't very easy. So it's quite complicated. But in a way, that's what's sort of quite exciting about it.
And were there any particular inspirations? I mean, either for the plots themselves? I mean, did you have to kind of do proper research into the era, or were you just...
Yeah, we read lots of books. So the Tosha is a real thing that happened, and there's lots of things. I was born in the East End, weirdly enough, as you can tell from my Cockney accent. So, but I was born in the East End, so there were things that I knew about or was interested in. We were interested in kind of the working class, of it being like a working class show of police, really. And there's things that happen in the series to do with like the fate of, what it was like to be a factory worker at that time and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The other half of the research was watching Dirty Harry and the Sweeney and stuff like that, because I see it as being a sort of an early 70s cop show. It's
1870s.
Yeah. But it's a little. There's bits of Shaft and there's bits of Dirty Harry and bits and pieces from that time. So in my mind, it's always got there's always a wah-wah guitar going wah, 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 whenever they're running around.
I mean, Ben, as the director, was that one of your kind of touchstones then that you wanted? Because there's obviously with the music and the sort of slow-mo, even the title credits, there's something of those sort of 70s cop shows to it. Was that a starting point for you?
Yeah, I think when I came on board, it was called Ye Sweeney, which was its working title.
Very much a working title.
Which we legally weren't allowed. But that was sort of one of the pitches. It's a weird one period-wise because it's set in the... What's the exact date?
1890 or so.
But it was a thing that Matt and I got excited about doing. There's a film Matt put me on to, which is Murder by Decree, which is who directed that one?
Bob Clark.
And it's the same period, but done by a director in the 1970s, and it has this sort of meld of I guess not camp, but it's sort of gothic camp. So it looked and felt like a 70s production, but with top hats and bowler hats and stuff. And then the action stuff that the guys talked about, I think, was something that we all got excited about. There's a trailer for Ripper Street Series 3, which is one of the campest things you've ever seen, which is just them running around and stuff blowing up and everybody getting overexcited. And the thought of doing that with these guys and just shooting a very silly comedy very seriously. And I think for these guys to take it that seriously, we wanted the stakes to be real so that if somebody gets punched or gets shot in the head, you know it.
It doesn't kind of flinch from violence, though, does it? I mean, there's blood, there's these enormous weapons that we see in those first 2 episodes. You know, there's kind of... It's the real deal, isn't it?
There was one, was it Dr. Johnson you told me a story about, Matt? Who was the person
Peeps.
that... Pete.
No, it's Peeps, yeah. Peeps was in a carriage with his wife and a tramp. Can you say tramp now?
Just have.
Poked his head into the carriage and Peeps killed him. And he describes how he did it. And it would have been in front of a bunch of people as well. And that just stayed with me. And I didn't want to recreate that as such, but that sort of atmosphere, that kind of intense violence, you know, within comedy.
I mean, there's a real kind of mystery to these. They're not, even though there's a lot of silliness around them, they're quite involving plots of what, and you know, there, like you say, there is kind of social justice woven into it and that kind of thing. So there is something to kind of compel you through it as well. It's not just gag.
The guys did so brilliantly, and that continues throughout. And there's an overarching story which Keeley is starting to hint on in there. But that was the thrill for me when we did the pilot, and the pilot was so exciting because we loved it and we found it funny, but it was bizarrely compelling, the story at the centre of it with Linley and the Peep Show.
And Matt Rabbit is a kind of classic maverick cop character. Is that something that you've kind of always had on your bucket list of roles to play?
No. No, I've never had a bucket list of roles, to be honest.
What appealed about this character?
Because it was different, and I thought it was interesting. I mean, it all comes back to Ben Farrell and I, huge Sweeney fans. And I've seen every episode of the Sweeney a lot of times, and it's how I learnt about pubs in London, because you can see them in the Sweeney and they're not there now, but you recognise everything else in the street. And that's boring, but I became obsessed, you know, with that sort of thing. So I've always wanted to do something like the Sweeney, and then we just discussed it about being Victorian, and then we try to talk each other out of it because we knew it would be expensive.
I mean, are there particular challenges, Hannah, to doing a kind of period piece
endless.
like this?
Yeah.
Where did you film it? What was the kind of logistics of all that?
So we shot half of it in a studio in London, in 3 Mills actually, which is in the East End. And what's good about it is it's a sort of Victorian mill as well, so you can be inside shooting interiors and then you can go outside and shoot explosions and it looks like Victorian London. And then we went to Chatham Dockyard, which is really helpful because you can just lock it off. You don't, lots of Victorian areas you have to lock it off from traffic, but actually you can have the whole run of the place, and it's sort of where everything is shot. So you'll be on one corner and Call the Midwife will be on the next corner. It's quite disorientating, actually.
And Ben, your Channel 4 viewers will know your work from Catastrophe, and you've just been working on Sex Education as well. So was this kind of quite a change of pace for you as a director, or is that quite normal to kind of...
No, I think it was on my bucket list to do a period thing. Like, there's a thrill for me as soon as the guys were in costume and we were there doing it, we had guns. It felt very much like I'd won a competition. And just all the elements coming together, like probably the most discussed element of it is Matt's coat, which Matt and I spent quite a lot of time getting right. But yeah, it was definitely a change of pace, just because I'd done Sex Ed's hour-long stuff and I guess a bit easier. Like it's so much fun to shoot, but it was challenging. Everything was sort of, if you panned left or right, you would start to see things that you shouldn't be seeing. It's it's one of those things where you rely on with like Catastrophe. If you're short of extras in scenes, you just call your mates and ask them to come down, unless they had Victorian costume, which Andy does have.
I didn't wear it tonight. I thought it would be a bit much, but I contemplated it.
But yeah, it was a lovely change of pace. It was just a really good, fun, silly world to lose ourselves in.
And Susan, Mabel is a fantastic character, isn't she? And does she kind of get what she wants? So obviously in the second episode, she's actually put on the case, and she turns out to be a bit of a whiz at solving crimes. But how does she develop as a character?
Well, she's persistent, as you can tell. I don't know how much I can reveal about it. It's what she wants, and so she doesn't stop banging on about it. And and obviously she finds a friend in Lydia, because it's one thing being in a police station full of blokes, but it's quite nice to meet another woman who sort of sees your potential. So you see her sort of making her.
I was sort of conflicted, maybe, between...
I don't know, Mum. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what to say. I'm making it out like a really
But it's certainly in that first episode, she kind of gets to voice some of, I suppose, our 21st century perspectives, doesn't she, on kind of, it's always why in Victorian crime dramas it's always the strangled
it's fun.
prostitute in the fog or whatever. So is that kind of, that must be quite a fun role to play.
It's fun because it's relevant, but it was relevant then, and I think that anything that is that sort of crosses over is because it's funny, as long as it's funny, and it just happens to still it's kind of sad that it's still relevant. It shouldn't be, but it is. But all of that is sort of stemmed from it being funny, that it is still then and now some dead naked bird. It's not funny actually, but it is, Fuck it, it's comedy.
They still do it in Shetland, but they don't have anyone coming in and making a joke about it.
No, they don't.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, how far is it that you looked at those TV shows? There's always one on, isn't there? There's kind of Whitechapel, Ripper Street that you mentioned. How far are you sort of poking fun at those?
Not.
A little bit. I personally, I've sort of, while we were writing this, avoided watching too much Victorian stuff. Read lots of Victorian research, but watched modern cop shows. It's, I was sort of thinking, well, how can we make it as funny as People Just Do Nothing, and as exciting as something that Jed Mercurio writes? It's trying to do all of that, or Sally Wainwright. That's the aim with this show.
I sort of thought that it was sort of because of Penny Dreadful and Ripper Street, and they're good shows, and there's various other ones. And I sort of thought, that's a genre, and so it's nice to do a funny version of that genre. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I have seen some, but you can't watch too many of them at once, because then you start borrowing their plots. So you've got to be kind of quite careful, because I don't want to get too kind of freaked out by going, we can't do that, we can't do medicine because they did medicine.
The risk actually is not borrowing plots, is looking at something and going, no, we can't do that now because they did that on that show. We can't do that on that show.
Because actually, we and them are probably reading the same book, so you sort of you start to cross over in some weird ways.
And Matt, you did some writing on this as well, is that correct?
Yeah.
So was that sort of, what kind of input did you have on it? Was it
Well, I didn't want to take the rise out of anything. I've got no interest in doing that. It wasn't about that for me at all. It was about just doing the Sweeney, but taking it back to Victorian times and doing the kind of things that were acceptable in Victorian times as a comedy, because I'd never seen that. I'd never seen anyone do that. And that was what was interesting. I wasn't interested in the other shows that were on at the time. I didn't really see those. I mean, it was just as simple as that. It was just wanting to do something like the Sweeney, but in the early days.
And I mean, there's quite a lot of action, I guess, for all of you. So was that something kind of new for you to do? I mean, it's not, you don't often get a lot of action in comedy, I suppose, like the sort of running around in corsets, chasing after people with guns. Like, was that a new experience?
Yeah, it was new. I've never been in a corset on screen before, so that was new. And then running around in the corset, in the dress that kept ripping, because it was so long, at a train. Why do you need a train? I can't be, that was hard. That was actually really hard, because you sort of want in your head, when you sort of practice a fight thing. You want to be really cool, like you're Neo, and then things are stopping you, clothing, breathing, and that sort of thing. But that you have to use it and try and be funny. But I've only had one opportunity to do comedy and do fight and stuff, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I knew that I'd be up for it.
But Fred just wore his own clothes.
I was going to say. So, I mean, you're probably better known, I mean, so far to viewers for real period dramas, for kind of appearing in the real deal kind of stuff.
Yep.
So how did this feel like a different...
That was basic. I was asleep for most of this. Woke up, had a jam tart, and then onto set. No, it was as much a challenge as any other role. You know, you bring something different to each character, however subtle that may be, and you enjoy relishing the playing of that and exploring within those parameters. You know, and just do my voice, but a bit posher.
And you have it's a classic kind of comedy odd couple thing, isn't it? With Strauss and Rabbit. So how does that relationship develop over the course of the next few episodes? How do we see them?
It's great. I mean, it was so interesting seeing the difference between the pilot, it was a pilot episode, but the first episode that we then shot a year before the second one, and seeing how much easier it felt watching the three of us have our badinage, which grows and grows as the series goes on, and so I thought that was rather winning. I can't remember your question.
Well, it was more just about how the relationship between Rabbit and Strauss, because they're sort of classic odd couple.
Yeah, they are, and they have immense affection for each other, which grows over the course of the show, and an understanding that together they're so unlikely, but together they are so much stronger. And they bring, you know, I think by the end of it, I think probably there's a bit of paternal figure going on there, but also a bit of brotherly as well. And we just had a gas.
Well, I just wanted to do that Fools and Horses thing. 'Cause I've always loved that. And I get bored of seeing people kind of bollock each other, you know, for a long period of time. And I think it's far more interesting if the three of them kind of look out for each other. And that was important right from the beginning, before the pilot. I wanted that. I wanted them all to, what else, you know, was kind of going on. They would be the enemy, and these three would be, you know, sort of tight.
Mm-hmm. And something you just said made me think something then about Rabbit, but I've forgotten it. I'll remember. Hannah, can you talk a little bit about the sort of other people that are appearing? Because obviously at the end of that first episode, that reveal of Keely Hawes is quite exciting. I mean, at the moment, she's kind of everywhere, isn't she? Quite exciting. So are there going to be more sort of people coming into the...
Yeah, there are. We were so lucky with casting. I mean, the most exciting bit of casting is the very beginning, when you make your kind of wish list, you know, and you have all these names on it, and you think, oh, they'll never do it. And in our case, obviously, we wanted Olivia Colman, but she wasn't available. So we moved on to Keely Hawes. No, that's not true. Just to be really clear. Keely was the first choice, and she's absolutely, you know, she is exactly who you want. All of us wanted to play that part, and I think what's so exciting is how many people, as we go through the show, came on board and wanted to do little turns in it. So we've got, I'm not sure if we're allowed to say, but we've got Taika Waititi in another episode. He has a quite exciting little turn, and obviously Sally Phillips comes in later in the series, as well as Jill Halfpenny. So I think we've got, you know, for me particularly, this amazing set of women in that show, and some of them would say that, you know, they don't get to work together that often because it's one or the other, and that's what was so nice about kind of putting together, because it can be a really male world. I think, you know, a lot of those other shows can feel very male, and she's got some real female powerhouses in it, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I suppose in the station and stuff, Mabel is the kind of lone female, isn't she? So she kind of rules the reason.
But she also sort of likes it, like, because she wants to be one of them. She wants, not in terms of like she wants to be one of the boys, but she wants to do what they're doing, like the freedom that they have and the stuff that they do. She wants to be on board rather than her going, oh, stupid men. Do you know? Even though she does think that, but like it's because she wants to be part of it. That's why she's there, because she loves it. Yeah.
And the thing I remembered now, I wanted to ask you about Rabbit, is that he's this curious mixture of, you know, he gets there in the end and he has these sort of flashes of genius, but he's also quite dumb a lot of the time, isn't he? He's this kind of curious mix of the two things. Was that something that you kind of developed over time, or did you know this was in his DNA?
I think from the beginning, because you're gonna watch 6 of these things, and these days you watch 6 on the trot. It's got to be interesting, and it can't be too. You can't kind of work out the lead characters very quickly, where you shouldn't, if you want to, sort of continue to be interested. So they've got to have faults, and they've got to be, sort of fallible and, and just rich enough for you to continue to the next episode. And hopefully you'll watch all 6. If you don't...
But, you mentioned there's this arc that we've already seen the beginning of, obviously, with the mysterious symbol and Keeley Hawes. So that's going to presumably continue for the 6 episodes. But does that get wrapped up in 6 episodes? And then, is there more life in this?
I don't know how much we can give away now.
I don't want you to give away the ending.
Yeah, there will be a climax.
We've got 7 seasons worked out, including the letter writing campaign about the 7th season. So, but to actually give that all away now would be problematic. But if if a couple of drinks later, and
So you're saying it's the new Game of Thrones?
yeah,
I'm
not saying that.
Well, the
No
thing now,
one's saying there's a big Game of Thrones gap in the market that a show has to fill.
Channel 4 can spend a bit more and give us a dragon. I think they can find the money for that. No, it'd be there's always petitions now for doing things again. Like there's 1 million signatures on the e-petition for doing the last series of Game of Thrones again. Maybe we should be the first show to ever do that. 7 seasons in, that would be fun.
Well, it's
Then it's just an extra season.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's open up to some questions from the audience. Someone immediately there on the right. Thank you.
Can I ask about the garb, about the clothes? It's obviously pretty heavy Victorian gear. Was it very hot to work in, and did you have a favourite item of clothing?
Not hot enough for you?
No, it wasn't hot enough. We filmed in January, and I was frozen. And I had one dress that saw... I eventually had 2, but it saw everything. I think I got shit on the hem as well. So we had a horse that shat, and then you had to wade through the shit, and then that was that. I just had shit. There was a point I was standing there, I was like, I've got shit on my dress. I've got actual horse. Can I? Yeah. Okay.
We just watched this.
A few times. Oh yeah, you just watched this. I tell you yeah. But it was really cold, and my feet. I've never had feet that cold, and you just think, God, they didn't think about this then. In the late 1800s. It drove me mad, actually. It looks great, though, but it drove me mad, personally. You guys?
You mentioned the coat was a kind of bone of contention, so how did you eventually settle? Not bone of contention, a kind of...
I knew that it was going to be blue, but it was about you explain what shows on screen, what pops out as...
Yeah, we got a really clever costume designer, Rosa Diaz, who I've worked with quite a lot, and the aim was to sort of creating that iconic trio, was that everybody else around them was stripped of colour and those 3 sat on top. And Matt gave me little visuals that he was really drawn to, and there's one of David Bowie in the 70s wearing red boxing gloves.
Yeah, that's
and he said, I want to look like this.
Well, it's Bowie and it's Superman 2. The colours are Superman 2 and Bowie. So it's blue, and that is the same colour as the red, I think, on Superman. That was what was trying to go for.
But we got the guy who made the new Doctor Who coat, made Matt's coat.
Oh. Yeah.
And we turned up for the final fitting, and we said, give us a look at Doctor Who's, and he brought it out, and we were like, oh, shit.
But it was fine. It was fine in the end. Yeah, it was a slight worry.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is a question for Ben. How long was your prep, your shoot, and your post, and what was the most difficult thing and the most interesting thing as a director?
It was a funny one because we did like the guy said, we did the pilot a year and a half ago. So you have a sort of disproportionate amount of prep for that one episode. So we did a lot of like the key casting with these guys and costume design and stuff like that. And it's one of those gorgeous shows where everyone only wears one thing, which is now my favourite thing in the world. So we had, I think, 6 weeks for that. Then we down tools for a year and a half, came back and had another 6 weeks, then 6 weeks to shoot it. And then, about a week and a half for each episode offline. So it's funny because it's a comedy still, but trying to be a bigger thing. And the Objective were incredible and pushed every cent wherever we could, and Channel 4 backed us all the way, but all of it was definitely tight. So it's the action which was really important to us. I think that's where you realise you aren't a drama, is that you just don't have time because you've got just enough time to do all the dialogue, and then it's like blow Tanner up with a bomb in a bag, and we had 15 minutes to do that and only one take to do it. So we said so we had the visual effects guys, and we said, we've only got one take, so make it big. So they stuffed extra stuff in, and it scared the shit out of everybody when they did it. But no, we were all sort of on board, and the guys were amazing because it was one of those where we were running between setups and just desperate to get everything in, and it keeps building. Like there's some great stuff coming up, especially in Ep 6.
Thanks very much.
And
I'm going to be greedy. I've got 2 questions for the cast. Firstly, there's a lot of physical action in it. Were there injuries? Were you knocked around, bruised and bashed? And the language is so colourful. Were you competitive over who swore the most or who got which lines?
Well, I'm out of this one. He doesn't really swear, except when he's unaware that he's swearing, which is absolute bullshit. He just thinks he picks up on, because he's his, Rabbit's Strauss's hero, so he'll take all the information. He's taking it all in very quickly. But in terms of the swears, he doesn't get any. But in terms of action, we were all right. I don't think we got knocked about too much, did we?
Nah, I mean it's. I make it sound like it's really hard work. It's really good editing. That's what it is. But no one got injured. I get the one C bomb. I think there was a few. We did like a few alternates, but I don't know whether they've made it. But I definitely get that Ep 1 so that's
the closest we got to getting hurt was there's one scene in a later episode in a carriage, and we got the giggles so badly in this scene because it was so claustrophobic inside it, and we began to laugh so hysterically and couldn't stop for about 20 minutes or something, which really annoyed everybody else by the end of it. But that was as close as I got to getting injured because it hurt.
Fair.
Matt's been quiet.
And Matt, no injuries? No?
No, none. No, it was all quite sort of controlled stuff.
It was Matt's stunt coordinator from Toast.
Yeah, I'd worked with him
really?
I'd worked with him since I started when I was in my 20s, I think. I first worked with him. He hasn't aged at all. And he hangs himself every day and sets himself on fire, which is extraordinary. But, yeah, I mean, there wasn't much. I mean, it probably looks a lot worse than it is, but no one really did anything. The thing I've just done was a lot more terrifying than Rabbit.
We had the most dangerous
just cold.
prop ever made.
What's that?
Yeah.
Rabbit's truncheon is
yes.
a thing of beauty.
The one with the nails or the actual truncheon?
No, silver one.
Oh, the silver.
With the rabbit on it.
Yeah, it's a solid steel truncheon that Matt's friend, what's he called?
Yeah.
Adam Savage from Mythbusters.
Where is that now?
I don't know. I haven't got it.
Yeah. But he did it. I think there's going to be an online thing of how he did it, but he makes like lightsabers and stuff for Star Wars, and he just said to Matt he'd do it, and it came in. But it would just kill you immediately.
Clock machine.
There was a rubber one for hitting people.
Yeah.
There's one in the middle up there.
Can I ask about the John Merrick was a delight in the first episode that we saw. Could you tell us about the choices for casting and creating that version of the character?
Hannah Mackay.
Yeah, so it is based on reality in that John Merrick was a bit more successful. We wanted him not to be a victim.
Yeah, there's a book called Inventing the Victorians by Matthew Sweet, which is a great sort of book telling you unexpected things about the late Victorian era. And he found some evidence that Merrick was actually rather good at cutting deals when he was in the show. So we thought, oh, let's sort of run with that, and let's make him like a theatrical impresario that's sort of like an Oscar Wilde character. And that's just, we thought, well, we haven't seen that before.
So it's sort of partly based on Oscar Wilde and partly based on various studio bosses we've come in contact with. And so there's just that kind of slightly spoilt kind of, yeah.
And just in terms of the casting, obviously it's one that you want to be really sensitive about because, we always try and do open casting. In this instance, the character is played by an actor called David Dawson, and we saw him very early on in the process, and we all fell in love with what he did. It's something really specific, as the guys say. It's sort of based slightly on Oscar Wilde and other kind of figures from the age. It's a kind of punk take, I think, on, as the whole show is, on that figure who is an icon. And we just fell in love with that character, that performance, I think, which was not really where we thought we wanted to go with it. But and he comes back in later episodes, and he is the kind of king of the show, actually, which I find really pleasing, that the joke is always on the other person, and that he's a very powerful kind of underworld figure as you go on.
Also, narratively, where we want him to sit in the cast is that we wanted a sort of an equivalent of Huggy Bear in Starsky and Hutch. There's someone with their ear to the ground that knows what's going on. We thought, wouldn't it be fun if that was Merrick?
In the front row.
Hi, I've got a comment and a question. So, the comment was just really well done. I thought the production was really, really well done, and the actors. I believed you guys. You guys took me into a world that I just believed every one of you. I didn't think for a minute you was acting. But I wanted to say to the writers, what draft was that? Because it's such a high concept.
Oh, shame.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's draft.
Couldn't put a number on it. There's a lot of sort of going back and forth between Matt and ourselves and Hannah, and it sped up and up and up and up until by the last week before shooting, me and Kev were sort of
on Christmas Day
throwing scripts across the desk, changing everything. Couldn't tell you.
I'd say it was somewhere between 10 and 20.
Yeah.
And we were on set. One of us would be on set every day, writing. If a thing was a little bit, alternative jokes. There's one line on like I won't say what it is, but there's one line in episode 2 that I've go, oh, that's really. It's like was written on set. So if anyone needs anything. Yeah, well, the lemon one, I think, was improvised. I think. Which is lovely. But so no, there's another line. But anyway, there's a lot. Thank you.
Sorry, can't be specific.
I thought it was fantastic. I had a really good yell out, laugh out loud, and I'll certainly be watching it. So thank you, and it was brilliant. Everybody was brilliant. But the thing I want to ask to the writers is, you've got some nice little tropes in it, like things like where they say sort of he's got the taste for it and stuff like that. Is that a thematic thing that's going to be going all the way through? And do you feel that your writing is going to sort of have an influence on sort of street language where people will be saying that sort of thing? And really interesting.
Wouldn't it be great? I don't know. We'll write the lines, and then with Matt in particular, Matt's delivery is unique. So the taste was in the script, but it's the way that Matt does it, which
the
is
taste from that PG Tips advert.
Yeah.
That's true. It's the taste.
Oh God!
Oh, I get it. Because I always thought that was ludicrous. And
God, I didn't know.
I wanted to use it somewhere, and this seemed perfect.
I think that's all we've got time for, sadly. It's going to be on Channel 4 in June. That's all I know at this point. But thank you very much to everyone tonight, and thank you all for coming.